Here is the recap of the first and second season of Severance. Somewhere in America, there is a large corporation called Lumon, and in the depths of its office there is a very specific floor. People working on this floor voluntarily agree to a certain operation called Severance. They have a special chip implanted in their brains, and now when they go down to this floor, their consciousness is switched. Roughly speaking, down there they don't remember anything from the outside world. Who they are, why they got here, and even what is happening in the outside world is not known to them. Also, when they come up from this floor, they completely forget what they were doing at work. To make it easier for you to understand, when you go downstairs, it is as if people's consciousness is replaced by a completely different personality that doesn't remember anything at all. In addition, I will call the personality on the outside outie and the personality on the inside innie to make it clearer to you who we are talking about. And logically, when you see that the action takes place in a white room, the actors are innie, and when the action takes place in the outside world, they are outie. I also want to clarify an important detail that when an innie gets into the elevator after work, the next moment he gets out of it the next day, because he doesn't remember anything beyond this floor. Roughly speaking, he has been doing nothing but working his entire conscious life after waking up. The main character's name is Mark. After the death of his wife, he was completely lost and decided to undergo a severance procedure, because he wanted not to think about her at least for a while. And Mark works there for a while. Having come down to the severance floor, he goes through the maze of identical corridors to his department, where 3 other people usually work together with him. However, Mr. Milchick, their supervisor, calls Mark with him to see his boss. There, Miss Selvig informs him that the former head of their department, Petey, has retired, and his position is now going to Mark. He is also instructed to go to the negotiation room, where he has to instruct the newcomer, who has come down to this floor for the first time. A woman named Helly wakes up in a locked room, not understanding who she is or how she got here. Mark tries to calm her down and explain what's going on, but she panics and demands to be let out. Eventually, Mark gives in and, using the instructions, which by the way are for absolutely everything on this floor, leads Helly to the emergency exit, explaining to her that all the employees have been through this. The woman goes out the door, but immediately comes back in. This is repeated several times, and Mark tells Helly that her outie is coming back in because she intends to work here and doesn't want to quit. Milchick then shows her a tape of her outie telling her that she voluntarily did this to herself. A frustrated Helly goes with Mark to their department, where he introduces the woman to her new co-workers, Dylan and an elderly Irving. He also shows her exactly what to do on the job, and it's even weirder stuff. You have to look for numbers on the screen that, for some unknown reason, evoke certain feelings in the observer, such as fear, joy, sadness, etc. Then put these numbers in a certain folder. Dylan informs Helly that if she follows the plan, she'll get various little entertainments, and the best worker will go to a waffle party at the end of the quarter. Let me remind you that the innie are always working, and they don't get paid a salary, and they can't spend it here anyway, so the only joy is from such small bonuses. Mark gets off work and goes to visit his pregnant sister Devon and her writer husband Rickon. There he notices a man watching him from the woods, and a short time later, he meets him at a diner. The man tells Mark that his name is Petey and informs him that they were best friends at work. Mark doesn't believe him, as they can't remember anything about work because of the severance. However, the man says that there is a way to reverse the severance and that the Lumon Corporation is now after him. A stunned Mark returns home where we see his neighbor, who turns out to be his boss, Miss Selvig. He doesn't know about her, of course, as he has no memory of the job. We later learn that Miss Selvig is undivided because of her status, and also undivided are Supervisor Milchick and the head of security. The next day, Mark's sister introduces him to her friend Alexa, and on a date with her, he meets the protesters. It turns out that many citizens are not happy with the practice of severance and find it inhumane. After a while, he even sleeps with Alexa, but spoils everything, and they break up. Soon, Mark meets Petey again and learns that due to the reverse surgery, Petey is not well and sometimes does not realize where exactly he is now at work or in the outside world. Mark offers him a place to stay, but the next day he disappears, and Mark finds him at a gas station dying of a seizure. Soon he finds Petey's cell phone at his house, which is constantly being called by an unknown number, but Mark doesn't pick it up. After a while, he goes to Petey's funeral for some reason, where he meets his wife and daughter. Also attending this funeral is Miss Selvig, who knows that Petey has restored the separation and suspects that Mark is aware of this. She also discreetly removes the severance chip from Petey's head. At work, Helly still can't accept her fate, and having written a message to her Audi, tries to get out of the floor. But it turns out that Lumon has a special device that doesn't allow any information to be entered or taken out on any kind of data storage. Mark stands up for Helly, for which the head of the security service takes him to the so-called break room, where in fact he is guilty of something, roughly speaking morally tortured, forcing in the end to sincerely admit his guilt. Helly is not deterred and makes a formal request to be fired, but her Audi rejects the request. The entire department of characters are sent to the perpetuity wing. It's something like a museum, where there are wax figures of previous directors of the Lumon Corporation with their sayings and wisdom. By the way, all the directors have the last name Egan. We learn that the company has been around for over 100 years. The main characters also enter the hall where the house of the first director and founder of the company, Keir Egan, is recreated. After the tour, Helly tries to escape again, and she is sent to the same break room, where she is morally tortured for several days. After leaving the break room, Helly still continues to rebel after a while. She threatens to hurt herself. Then the next day, she is shown a message from her Audi. The Audi says that the innie is obliged to work because the Audi has decided so, and that the innie has no right to vote at all, because the innie is a nobody and will be regretted if she doesn't obey. Realizing that she has no other choice, she decides to end her life, but Mark and the head of security save her. After that, Helly is under constant surveillance. Mark's sister's husband, named Rickon, leaves him his new personal growth book, but the paranoid Miss Selvig picks it up and brings it to the office. She tries to find some hidden message in it, but soon forgets it in the conference room. Walking through the corridors, Irving meets Bert, the head of the optics and design division, and a spark develops between them. Irving visits him in his department, and when he returns, he finds the very same book by Rickon, which soon Mark and Dylan start reading secretly, and their inner selves begin to rebel against the system. In the outside world, Mark goes to see Devon, his sister who is about to give birth. She goes to give birth at a special country club that specializes in this. There she meets the pregnant wife of a senator, who is acting strangely. We later learn that the woman has resorted to severance surgery so that her innie will give birth and the Audi won't feel all that pain. For the record, the public has never heard of severance outside of the Lumon Corporation. Soon Devon decides to hire a babysitter, and she turns out to be Miss Selvig, who thus spies on the unsuspecting Mark. The bosses notice that Irving and Bert spend a lot of time together, and that their departments are beginning to communicate, so they secretly set them against each other. However, they do not succeed, and the main characters get acquainted with the optics and design division, which turns out to be quite a lot of people. There, Dylan stealthily steals some strange laminated card and hides it behind the toilet. Also, Helly and Mark accidentally stumble upon a department where goats are raised. Plus, Mark is once again sent to the break room for disobedience. Suddenly, Innie Dillons awakens at the home of his Audi, where their supervisor, Milchick, demands to know where he hid the very card. Dylan is shocked and doesn't understand how he switched without being in the office, to which Milchick replies to him that there is a so-called overtime feature. Dylan tells him where he hid the card, but at that moment, Dylan's son runs into the storeroom and hugs his father, after which the overtime is switched off. When he comes to his senses at work, he asks the supervisor about his son, but he refuses to give any more information about the outside world. Dylan then reports the incident to his co-workers, who are determined to rebel. In the outside world, Mark does decide to answer the constant calls from an unknown number to Petey's phone. A certain woman arranges a meeting with him, and there he learns that she is a former Lumon surgeon, who had been involved in Severance operations and had figured out a way to reverse the process. Suddenly, they are found by the very same Lumon security officer, but the woman kills him and orders Mark to leave. But, before she does, she gives him a security guard key card that can open any door in the office. The woman says to take it with him to work and tells him that his innie will figure out what to do with it. The bosses are unhappy that the main characters are hanging around the Severance floor. The management is putting doors in their department that they can't just open. Mark finds the very same key card in his pocket and informs his friends about it. They decide to sneak into the security office and find out more about how overtime works, as they intend to wake up in the outside world and tell the public what is going on here. Mark and Helly sneak into the security office, and it turns out there is no one there. They get the instructions on how to turn on overtime and go back to the department. Meanwhile, Irving, who has feelings for Bert, goes to see him in the department but discovers that he's retiring and it's his last day on the job. I want to make it clear that for the intro, this is equivalent to death, as he will never wake up at work again and his consciousness will simply disappear. Miss Selvig notices that Mark is acting strange and sends him to a special procedure where a woman named Casey, who is also severanced, tells Mark the attributes of her outie. In theory, this is supposed to put people at ease somehow. Afterwards, Miss Selvig orders Casey to be sent to some sort of testing floor, and we never hear from her again. Soon we are shown a picture of Mark's dead wife, and we see Casey on it, which means that his wife is not dead after all. The main character's department fulfills the quarterly goal, and Miss Selvig suggests Mark to choose one employee to go to the so-called waffle party. He chooses Dylan, and in the meantime, the main characters are working out an escape plan. According to the plan, after everyone leaves work, Dylan stays for the waffle party, escapes from it, and infiltrates the security office, where he turns on the rest of the co-workers overtime. Those waking up in the outside world will have to get their bearings and find someone they can trust, then tell them what kind of torment they're enduring on the Severance floor at Lumon. The main characters spring into action. The waffle party turns out to be a rather strange action. Dylan goes to the Perpetuity Wing, the very museum where a replica of the company founder's house stands, lies down on the bed, and half-naked people in strange masks start dancing in front of him. Dylan escapes the party, infiltrates the security office, and turns on overtime for his co-workers. Meanwhile, Miss Selvig reports to her superiors and is fired from her job because of what happened earlier. She tells them that Petey somehow reversed the severance, but they don't believe her. Selvig then goes to Mark's sister's house, where her husband Rickon is throwing a party to celebrate the release of his book. Irving wakes up at his Odie's house and finds himself drawing the same pictures of a dark corridor over the years. For the record, the same corridor led to an elevator to the mysterious testing floor. After searching the house, Irving discovers that his outie was also trying to figure out what exactly they were doing at work. The man decides to look for Bert, he somehow finds his address, and somehow by car gets to his house. However, in the window, he notices that he is happily living with his husband, but still comes knocking on the door. Mark awakens at Rickon's party for his book and discovers Miss Selvig in front of him, but doesn't give a look. However, the woman soon realizes that someone has turned on overtime and rushes to Lumon's office, even though she has been fired. A dazed Mark tries to find someone in the crowd of people he can trust and eventually recognizes Rickon, whose book he's already learned by heart and who has changed his life. Mark learns that he has a sister and tells her about everything that is going on at Lumon and that their babysitter is his boss. He learns from his sister that his outie was married, but his wife died in a car accident. Mark finds a picture of himself with his wife and recognizes her as the same woman Casey from work. He runs to his sister and yells that she's alive, then overtime is cut off as that's when Milchick breaks into the security office and knocks Dylan to the ground. Let's go back a little bit. Helly comes to her senses at what appears to be a lavish Lumon event. She learns that she is the daughter of James Egan, the current CEO of the Lumon Corporation, and she will someday take his place in the company. She also learns that the event is in her honor, where she is scheduled to perform soon. It turns out that Lumon wants to legalize severance not only at her job, But to make it a widespread practice, according to the management, all people should become the children of Keir Egan, whatever that means. Just before the performance, Miss Selvig stops Helly and tells her not to do anything stupid. However, Helly goes on stage and tells the audience that the people on the Severance floor are unhappy and will be tortured there if they disobey, after which Helly is cut off. This is the end of the first season. Let's pause for a moment. Here you can like this video, subscribe to my channel, and write some comments. Thanks. Mark's innie comes to his senses on a severed floor. He rushes to Miss Casey's office, but it turns out it no longer exists. Back in his department, he learns that his co-workers have been replaced by some other people. Miss Selvig has been fired, Mr. Milchick is now in charge of the floor, and his deputy is a girl named Huang. The manager tells him that 5 months have passed on the surface. After their uprising outie, Dylan, Helly, and Irving did not want to go back. This kind of rebellion changed a lot of things in Lumon. For example, there will no longer be any punishment in the break room, and there will be less supervision. Mark realizes that he has lost his only friends, so despite Milchick's warnings, he contacts the management. He demands that they return his old co-workers, otherwise he refuses to work. Surprisingly soon, they all return and share what they saw on the surface during overtime. However, Irving notices Helly's strange behavior and begins to suspect that her outie actually came down to the divided floor. Meanwhile, we learn that Milchick lied to the main characters about the 5 months and that their act affected the company. Turns out it's only been a few days. It was Lumon who suspended all the main characters. And Helly Egan recorded a video in which she told the public that she simply got drunk and her words were a lie. Selvig was suspended and offered some mediocre position. Although she gave all of herself for the sake of this job and the project called Cold Harbor, which all this time the main characters were working on. This sort of thing offended Selvig greatly. She got into her car and drove off in an unknown direction. Meanwhile, Mark learns from his sister Devon that his innie before the blackout said that Gemma is alive. The main character does not understand how this can be, as he saw his wife's corpse with his own eyes. At first, Mark didn't want to go back to work, but Milchick talked him into coming back. Mark and Helly decide to find the missing Miss Casey. They start searching the severed floor and stumble upon the mammalian's nurturable department. At first, they were hostile, all because the bosses specifically tell their employees different tall tales about other departments so that they do not come in contact. The main characters try to find out from them something about Miss Casey, and mammalians say that they haven't seen her for a long time. Meanwhile, Irving goes to the optics and design department, where in a conversation with Felicia, he learns about the very hallway his outie was obsessed with. The older woman tells him that it leads to what is known as the exports hall. At one time, they used to ship a lot of the products they made in their department there. We are not shown this, but Irving apparently decides to find the dark corridor, and eventually does. By the way, the Lumon Corporation is very powerful, and its founder, Keir Egan, is the center of worship, both by some employees and people outside the company. There are many moments in Season 2 that seem very strange and steeped in symbolism. I will give examples of these moments and not speculate about them. Hopefully everything will be explained to us eventually, but in the meantime, draw your own conclusions. For example, for Milchick accepting the position of severed floor manager, his superiors give him a set of paintings of him as Keir Egan. Milchick did not really like this gift and put it in the closet. Milchick also has his first performance review, where he is told off by Mr. Drummond. We don't know what exactly he does, but he clearly knows all of Lumon's dirty secrets. Drummond demands that Milchick stop using long words and treat innie like what they really are. And the girl, Huang, completes her internship by the end of the season. She is forced to sacrifice her favorite item and then transferred to another branch. I'd also like to note Lumon's fixation on water. Throughout the series, water figures incredibly often in one form or another. After investigating, Lumon learns that the main characters have risen in part due to reading a book on self-development written by Rickon. Natalie, the voice of Lumon's management, comes to him and manipulates the man. She asks him to write an adaptation of her work, but specifically for severed employees. The man agrees, and under Lumon's strict guidance, writes such a book. The company, having apparently taken some ideas from it, decides to organize a kind of team building for Innie. The uncomprehending main characters come to their senses on a frozen lake and unite to climb a cliff, where they watch a strange video. They are told an almost biblical story about Keir Egan and what a great man he is. They wander through the woods and eventually meet Milchik, who has set up camp. The main characters have a strange team-building session. During the night, a spark slips between Helly and Mark, and they sleep together. In the morning, Irving meets Helly and demands that she confess that she is actually an outie standing in front of him. The man starts drowning her out, and Helly begs Milchik to switch her, which he actually does. Helly's Innie regains consciousness, and we realize that indeed the real Helly Egan has been with the main characters all this time, spying on them. And because Irving has endangered one of the employees, he is fired, which is tantamount to death for Innie. The Cold Harbor project is incredibly important to Lumon, and Mark plays a key role in it. So to keep him from rebelling, they allow Helly's Innie to continue working on the severed floor. Meanwhile, Dylan remembers Irving's last words and thanks to them finds a note with a route leading to the very same dark corridor. He tells the rest of the team about it and hides the note where he found it. Soon, Mark confesses to Helly that he slept with her outie, and the woman considers it unfair, as she was the one who had feelings for Mark. So soon they are sleeping together. We are also shown a department in which people very similar to the main characters observe their work and exactly how they react to it. After being fired, Irving meets Bert, and they realize that there was something between their innies. Bert invites Irving to dinner, and there we learn that Bert worked for Lumon even before the severance procedure came into existence. Irving realizes that he was one of the company's security people who did all sorts of dirty deeds. At this time, Drummond breaks into Irving's apartment and discovers that he is digging up Lumon. Irving is in danger and Bert tries to help him. He takes him to the railroad station, puts him on a train, and asks him to never come back. Milchik decides to get Dylan on his side. He tells him that they are going to build a room for him on the severed floor, where he can see his outie's wife and child from time to time. Eventually, Dylan meets Gretchen, and feelings develop between them as the woman sees him as the man she once fell in love with, not the loser her husband has become. Dylan confesses his love for her, but Gretchen realizes it's wrong and leaves the building. Desperate, Dylan writes a letter of resignation and quits his job. However, he returns because his outie, though he realizes it's all wrong, wants Innie to stay alive. We are also shown that Helly's Innie finds Irving's note with instructions on how to get into the very same corridor. During the evening, she tries to memorize the path as her father, Jamie Egan, suddenly appears in the room. He says that he does not see the fire of Keir in his daughter, but he does see it in her Innie. Mark's outie and his sister Devon try to figure out if Gemma is really alive. Soon, the man meets Lumon's former surgeon named Ragabi again, who suggests he undergo the same reintegration procedure as Pitty did in the previous season. Ragabi assures him that it will be safer this time, and he won't die. Mark agrees, and after some brain manipulation, his consciousness begins to merge with Innie's. This leads to a series of jumps, and one day he remembers that he did indeed see Gemma on the severed floor. Soon, Ragabi realizes that the procedure has gone wrong, and Mark may have a brain hemorrhage, so they need to inject some sort of substance into his head. The operation is successful, but Mark loses consciousness. Just then, Devon comes in and demands an explanation. Out of desperation, she wants to call the only person who can supposedly help her brother. She is Miss Selvig. Hearing who Devon wants to contact, Ragabi leaves. We're shown a flashback to when Mark and Gemma first met. Turns out they've been trying to have a baby, but it's not working out. Eventually, the couple went to a fertility clinic run by Lumon. At present, Gemma is being held on the testing floor at Lumon. She's constantly being asked all sorts of weird questions. Gemma is also undergoing some sort of testing. Roughly speaking, on this floor there are many rooms with the names of the same folders in which the main characters put the numbers when they work. Upon entering one of these rooms, Gemma's consciousness switches and her innie appears. In each room, she becomes a participant in various unpleasant activities, and as you can imagine, for innie it's comparable to hell, as in fact she has never seen anything but these activities in her life. And in each room it is a new Gemma's innie. All this is controlled by Dr. Mauer, who is the protagonist in these experiments. When Gemma comes out of the rooms, she of course remembers nothing and is questioned about her sensations time after time. We also learn that the only room she hasn't been in yet is the door labeled Cold Harbor. Soon the woman says she wants to leave, but Lumon can't let that happen. And Dr. Mauer lies to her that Mark has long since forgotten about her and married someone else. Gemma does not believe him. She hits him with a chair and tries to escape. However, when she takes the elevator, her mind switches to Miss Casey, who of course understands nothing. She is met by Mr. Milchick and convinces her to go back down. After which, the returning Gemma realizes that she can't escape. We're shown exactly where Miss Selvig went. The woman returns to the small town of Salt's Neck, where she grew up. The settlement was home to the Lumon ether factory, and after it closed, the remaining residents became addicted to this substance. Selvig meets up with her old friend Hampton and asks for his help. She wants to get into her late mother's house, but fears Lumon is watching, and she may be captured. Hampton secretly brings her there, and Selvig goes inside, where she is met by Aunt Sissy, who is obsessed with Kira Egan and the religion created around him. This series is very strange, and has a lot of different symbolism. However, we eventually learn that Selvig has been working in the factories since she was a little girl, and has had a Lumon internship, just like the Huang girl in the present tense. In the evening, Selvig finds her old notes, which contain evidence that she was the one who invented all of Lumon's technology, including the severance procedure. Suddenly, a car appears on the horizon, and Selvig decides to leave her mother's house immediately. Just then, she gets a call from Devon about her brother, and informs her that Mark has been reintegrated. A short time later, Mark regains consciousness, and they meet with Selvig. The woman says that Gemma will die if the Cold Harbor project is completed. It is just in its final stages, and Lumon's bosses are not happy that Mark did not come to work at the most crucial moment. Selvig decides to take him to the cottage where the senator's severed wife gave birth last season. Mark's innie comes to his senses in an unfamiliar room in which he sees his former boss. She tells him that the only way to save Mark's wife is to find the very elevator at the end of the hallway. Go down to where his consciousness switches to Audi. There Mark will find his wife and take the elevator back up again. After that, it is Innie's task to guide the woman through the corridors of the severed floor to the exit. Selvig also tells us exactly what these numbers and name folders represent. This is roughly speaking Gemma's consciousness. Each folder is a different innie. Of course, we are not told what exactly Lumon needs all this for. Then there is a dialogue between Mark's innie and Audi, with the help of a video camera. Audi tries to talk Innie into saving his wife, which will lead to Lumon's exposure and the closing of the company. Innie realizes that he and his friends will then simply die. Audi tries to explain that he will perform a reintegration procedure, and they will become one. However, Innie remarks that the others may not agree to this operation, or he is deceiving him, and there is no operation at all. After that, they quarrel, and Innie demands that next time he wakes up on a divided floor. Which actually happens. Mark's innie is met by Helly, and they head off to their workstations. They exchange information, and Mark decides to rescue Gemma after all. After finishing the Cold Harbor file, Mr. Milchick shows up and congratulates Mark. A whole orchestra from the choreography and merriment department shows up. The performance begins, and Mark escapes. Helly lures Milchick into the toilet, and together with Dylan, who has arrived to help, they restrain him. Helly convinces the orchestra to come over to their side, as they realize that Lumon can get rid of them at any moment. Meantime, Mark gets to the right corridor, but the door is locked. Just then, in the next room, Mr. Drummond is preparing a lamb for sacrifice. Lorne from Mammalian's nurturable department brought it in, and is saddened that she has to raise animals for such a purpose. Drummond informs her that the lamb will be buried with Gemma, as he suddenly hears a noise outside. There he sees Mark, and a fight breaks out. Eventually, Lorne helps the main character, and Mark takes Drummond hostage. They take an elevator downstairs, but while switching consciousness, Mark accidentally pulls the trigger and the man dies. Meanwhile, after the Cold Harbor project is completed, Gemma is taken to the designated room. There, the new Innie is tasked with taking apart a crib, like the one Mark once assembled for their baby, whom she lost in a miscarriage. Gemma does this, and such a thing does not cause her any emotion, which makes Dr. Maurer and J. Megan incredibly happy. Mark ends up on the testing floor and finds the right door. Once inside, he interferes with the experiment, causing Maurer and Egan to freak out. Mark, along with the woman, leaves the room and her consciousness is switched, after which the husband and wife are finally reunited. The couple rush to the elevator, and the last thing they hear from Dr. Maurer is that they are going to kill everyone. As they reach the severed floor, their Innie already regains consciousness. Mark leads Miss Casey to the emergency exit but doesn't follow her. He takes Helly's hand, and the happy couple runs off down the corridors. This is the end of the second season. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel and click the like button. Thanks for watching. Goodbye.